Shalom, shalom, giving honor and praise to the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Now, Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, simplified part 4. We're going to, of course, go back into Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. We're going to read a couple of verses and gain some understanding. It says, "And the Most High shall bring thee back into Egypt in ships." Now, let's notice something very meticulous, brothers and sisters. It says verbatim, "And the Lord," which we say is the Most High, "shall bring thee back into Egypt in ships." The point I want to reference and highlight is the word "and." That means that you have to go before that verse to understand the full context of what's being spoken of. Because the word "and" is a conjunction. It brings two thoughts together. So let's, in light of that, brothers and sisters, go into Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and we're going to start, if we will, in verse 25 once again. And it says the following, because we went over before in part 2, verse 45, right? That all these curses shall come upon thee and pursue and overtake thee. So therefore we know that you can't take from a particular verse to another verse and say this is about one particular timeline or one particular era in just Israelite history. All right, so let that be noted and understood. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. "The Most High will cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and shalt flee 7 ways before them, and shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth." So one of the things to point out, brothers and sisters, is the fact of when the Babylonians came, the Israelites were slain before their enemies. The book of Jeremiah talks about that. When the Assyrians came, the Israelites were slain before their enemies. When the Greeks came, when you go into the book of the Maccabees and the Apocrypha, it says that the Greeks every day will look for more Israelites to put to death. And when you go in there, it says about how the people of the Seleucids would sit there and hang babies by their necks. That is called lynching. The book of Maccabees talks about how the Greeks used to do that to the Israelite babies. And then when you go in your own time and read in the book of Josephus about his account concerning the Israelites and the Romans, brothers and sisters, you had it to where the Romans was sitting there digging up the ground to sit there and get more Israelites out to have them put to death. It speaks about how when Domitian's birthday came, how Titus used to sit there and have Israelites thrown off into the lions. But you know what none of those things say? Not trying to be funny. From Babylon, prior to that Assyria, the Greeks after the Median Persian era, and the Romans after the Greek era, none of them says that they got Israelites by taking them into the land of Northeast Africa, aka Egypt, by way of ship. That right there is talking about something meticulous. So let that be noted. In light of the fact that it says "and," we have to then go before verse 68 to understand what happened with that people. One of the things that we read in verse 25 is the fact that it says, "You shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth." Now, a lot of times you have it to where, like in the King James Version and so forth and so on, it says, "You shall be removed to all the kingdoms of the earth." But I want to sit there and show the Hebrew word in Deuteronomy 28, verse 25, is the word za'awah, which means trembling or fright, as we see here. And that's the same word in Deuteronomy 28, verse 25 in the Hebrew. Wahayita laza'awah lakol mamleket ha'aretz. You shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. So if it says all the kingdoms, how can you then try to pinpoint it to just one particular timeline? That's something important to let it be noted. All right. So hopefully by now, the understanding of trying to say a particular verse to a particular verse is speaking about only the Israelites in Babylon or all the Israelites in Rome has been smashed. Let's go to verse 30 of Deuteronomy 28. It says, "Thou shalt be twelfth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house and shall not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard and shall not use the fruit thereof." Okay, blessed be the Most High. We're going to bring it back home the Israelite style. You understand? When you go into the history of slavery, you will then know and understand that our people built houses in Pennsylvania, but we don't live there. We built and designed the White House. Benjamin Banneker designed the first one, and black slaves built the second one after The British had it burnt down in the year 1814. The original White House is not what you see there today. So let that be noted. Black people was responsible for both White Houses. And there's not been a black president by a brother when I say black. Because the guy that's there now is not a brother. That man's ancestry, as many people point out, goes back to the English. So let that be noted. Let's go on. Deuteronomy 28, verse 32. It says what? Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. This means that not all people on the earth are the same. Thy sons and thy daughters. That means it shows possession. Thy meaning your. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look, and fear with longing for them all the day, and there shall be naught in the power of thy hand. The Jewish man in this Holocaust did not go through that. They were put in concentration camps and were burnt. They did not have their sons and their daughters given into another people, and their eyes looking for them, and their wives given into other people, with the yoke of iron upon their neck. So let's understand how Deuteronomy 28 is to be explained. Okay, let's go now into verse 33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed away. So thou shalt be mad for the sight which thine eyes shall see. Brothers and sisters, it's our people. When you go into history that filled the insane asylums, because we could not sit there and deal with some of the oppression and some of the drama and some of the sad situations that our people were going through. This is talking about us, so let that be noted and understood. It says in verse 36, the Most High will bring thee and thy king, whom thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation that thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, and there thou shalt serve other gods of wood and stone. When did the Jewish man serve wood and stone gods? Because according to them, they never violated the laws of the Most High. Worshipping wood and stone is a violation of the Most High God's law. But according to them, they never violated the law. So therefore, by their own admission, they have disqualified themselves to being the people of the children of Israel. So let's see what happened. You had a Chaldean man named Abraham that came from the land called, in that era, the land of Napur. You understand? And when you go into the record of Godfrey Higgins in his book entitled Anacalypsis, the Chaldeans were originally Negroes. His son Isaac also Chaldean. His grandson Jacob also Chaldean. As stated, the Chaldeans were people of color. Jacob mated with women who were of the Aramean people. In the presentation I did entitled Hebrew Slacks His Souls Part 1, I showed the color of the people of the Arameans. They are of color. The children of Israel are of color. So let that be noted and understood. As time went on, they migrated into certain parts of the African continent. That was part of the Diaspora. We went over in part 2 and in part 3 about the Israelites being scattered in Elephantine Alley. What will stop them from going even further south and forming the people today that we call the Falasha, who call themselves Beta Yisrael, who call themselves the house of Israel, and going even further south into the people that you call the Limba of today, that is laid claim to being from the tribe of Levi or Levi, which is the third tribe in Israel. You understand? So we have to then know and understand that the children of Israel migrated predominantly into what you call the African continent. And as time went on, it says what in verse 64? And the Most High shall scatter thee among all peoples, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. And there thou shalt serve other gods which thou hast not known, even wood and stone. Verse 37, to collaborate, I went over that like that for a reason. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all the peoples, whither the Most High shall lead thee away. So this is how you become Yoruba, Ashanti, Igbo, Akan, and so forth and so on, and these other tribal names that cannot predate past 300 AD, because those are the tribes of Israel that wind up migrating and settling what we call Western Africa and forming that. That's why history, linguistics, and timeline is very important. So let that be noted and understood. All right? So now, it says they will serve gods of wood and stone. Ain't that what the people doing as they scattered in among the different Hamitic nations and everything like that? They took on some of their customs in their cultures. Because we already showed that Israel ain't going to Europe. Israel, by their own volition, went into the African places. And the ones that Titus and them took to Europe were captives. But the bulk and the majority went to African countries. Okay, now, and among these nations thou shalt have no repose, neither shall the sole of thy foot have any rest. But the Most High shall give thee there a trembling heart, filling of eyes, and languishing of soul. So that's what wound up happening when Israel was scattered. So I wanted to have that read for a particular reason. Brothers and sisters, this guy right here is one of the Assyrian kings, Sennacherib. This here is an image of Yehu, king of Israel, bowing down to Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria. This is correlating what we read about Jeremiah, speaking about Israel being in the captivity of Babylon and Assyria. When this empire fell, Israel migrated that way. All right? This, as we shown in part 1, is the archer Titus. This gentleman right here is Shalmaneser V. And this, brothers and sisters, is the map of the Israelite diaspora that wound up happening with our people and how we wound up being over in this place and what happened from that point. Now, I want to go, brothers and sisters, into a reference material and a reference quote, if we will. I have a book here entitled, brothers and sisters, A History of the American People. And this is written by a guy named Paul Johnson. And on page 9, right, of this book, here is what we read concerning this particular aspect. All right? And it says the following. Over 300 years, Brazil absorbed more African slaves than anywhere else and became, as it were, an Afro-American territory. Throughout the 16th century, the Portuguese had a virtual monopoly of the Atlantic slave trade. So let's know and understand that the people of Israel that were taken out of their land eventually and unfortunately were scattered to parts, brothers and sisters, of Western Africa. And I would like to go and show, brothers and sisters, I have a book here entitled History of Slavery, if we will, by Susan Everett. And many people have seen this picture before on page 47. This is slave trade ship. See, this is the Mount Zorion, the double distress Ba'aniyot in ships or with ships. Because Titus, even when you read the record of it, he migrated by horse through the Sinai from Antioch to the land of Alexandria. So let that be noted. He went from Alexandria in Egypt all the way into the land of the Euphrates when you go and you read the record in Josephus. So what people then are we looking at that was taken into captivity, brothers and sisters, by the way of ship? These brothers and sisters were the scattered tribes of the nation of Israel that migrated over into many parts of Western Africa. This, once again, is a map showing such a case. So let that be noted and understood. This is why many brothers and sisters find a difficult time trying to claim, oh, we are African at that and leave it at that, because the people who were taken out were not indigenous to Western Africa. They were migrants that went over there from other places. Now, when you go in your own time into a book entitled A History of West Africa by Basil Davidson, he gets into that subject too, about how the Yoruba say they from another place, the Nzima say it, the Igbo say it, and so forth and so on. So this right here, we spoke about Brazil getting majority of the slave trade. British North America, Spanish America, British Caribbean, Danish Caribbean, French Caribbean, Dutch Caribbean, Brazil. The slave trade. This is what happened with our people when we were shipped over from Western Africa going over into the Western Hemisphere by way of ship. Now, for those following, it says what in Deuteronomy 28? It shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. So we begin to see, even in illustrations, what happened with our people on those ships. Then it says also in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, brothers and sisters, as the yoke of iron here, and as we see here, thou shalt plant a vineyard and not use the fruit thereof. They used to put as a mast there and a lock in the back so we can't eat the produce, with a yoke of iron upon your neck. So who went through these kind of things? That was our people, brothers and sisters. It was not anybody else. So the solution, brothers and sisters, is not to sit there like Moors do and try to ask these people for land and property. It is actually to return back to Yah and keep his laws, statutes, and commandments found in the Old Testament. Shalom.